Last month, Scott Maxwell with the Orlando Sentinel wrote about Brad's exceptionalism in his column titled, 10 People Who Make Orlando a Better Place to Live. 10. He's in the top 10. Brad is one of iDignity's first clients and has been volunteering with us ever since, including serving on the iDignity board of directors. So be really nice to him because he's like my boss. He actually is my boss. Yet what inspires me the most is to witness him going from homeless himself to dedicating his life to effectively serving those that are homeless. Please welcome Brad Sefter.
Got me all teary-eyed and everything now. Oh, good gosh. Let me get rid of this stuff. All right. I can't say I'm one of the best public speakers, but I will try to entertain you tonight. I won't be as funny as Chris, man. He was on a roll tonight. I tell you, man, that was great. Okay. For a long time, my life was pretty ordinary. I was born in Pennsylvania. My dad was in the Navy. He flew up from Guantanamo, where he was stationed after I was born, to see me. We moved to Virginia. We lived in Lynchburg, right by the Blue Ridge Mountains. Very pretty up there. Then at the age of 10, my parents got divorced. My mom, sister, and we moved to Daytona Beach so my mom could be with her best friend who lived there. Shortly after my mom got married again, we moved down to South Florida in Palm Beach. But like way too many kids, I was affected by physical and sexual abuse. That was part of my young life. I look back now and I think that's why I turned to alcohol and drugs as a form of self-medication. For a while, I managed to walk around as a functioning addict. I got married at 20. I did it pretty well at Publix. I started off as a part-time bagger, full-time stock, then into management, and that was going well. Still, the addiction was always there, always holding me back. I got divorced, moved back to Virginia, married again, but I had 2 wonderful, beautiful children out of that. Divorced again, then back to Florida, back to Publix. My son came to live with me for a little while, and when that didn't work out and he moved back to Virginia, that's when the wheels kind of came off. Lost my job, lost my place to live. I moved to Orlando. I had a friend up here, and I kind of couch surfed a while, worked, and then I ended up homeless. My salvation, or at least the path to my salvation, came through an encounter with a homeless guy I met at Lake Eola, and he led me to the Orlando Union Rescue Mission. There, I found Christ. He removed my addictions, and that's praise the Lord. And he introduced me to iDignity. Go figure. The year was 2008. And iDignity had just begun its mission. As Michael said, I was one of their first clients, got my identification documents, and since then I've been volunteering at every monthly event. I love the warm and welcoming nature of the staff and volunteers. And oddly, I look forward to getting up at 4 a.m. to help set up the tables and chairs, because I knew in a few hours they'd be filled with people who need ID and people eager to help them get that ID. Think about that for a minute. Think about what that means, especially to people that have been homeless. They're used to being ignored. Every day of their lives, people pass them by, look the other way. They feel invisible, unloved, friendless. Then they go to an iDignity event, and all the volunteers welcome them. Suddenly, they have 120 friends who speak to them, look them in the eye. They respect them. They care for them. They love on them. Becoming a part of iDignity was life-changing. It led me from a job at Publix to now a career in social work. Don't ask. Oh, gosh. Now you know a little bit about me. So let's fast forward to 2018, and let's talk about my friend Paul. You may have seen Paul if you've been to Orlando City Soccer Stadium. He used to sit by the electrical junction box right on the northeast corner of the stadium on Central Boulevard. He sat there every day for months. My job today is working as an outreach specialist for the Healthcare Center for the Homeless. That basically means I walk around downtown every day and meeting people just like Paul and offering them services and trying to help them. Paul sat by that same electrical box every day wearing the same clothes. It was as if he were glued to the spot. Each time I saw Paul, I would greet him, maybe ask how he was doing, if he needed any help. But for months, he would just stare at me vacantly with no expression or awareness. Then he'd just turn away. You get a lot of different reactions from homeless people. Some are outgoing, some are reserved. Paul, he was just unresponsive. And then one day, after months of unanswered greetings, Paul did respond. He said hello. I had his trust, and it was my opening to find out what he needed, which was shelter and an ID. Paul had neither. No home, no Florida ID, no birth certificate, no social security card. Paul told me that he had been to the shelters and they wouldn't let him in because he couldn't prove who he was. It was helpless and hopeless without identification. In Florida, you usually need an ID to get into a shelter. But because of my credibility at the Orlando Rescue Mission, I managed to get Paul in there. That was it was a temporary place to stay, but the adjustments proved to be too much for Paul and he left. I knew from experience that the path to permanent shelter, a home, and a new start began with an ID. It always does. Identification is foundational. An ID is like a hammer to a roofer, a shovel to a gardener. It is the essential tool to get people back on their feet. Without it, they aren't getting a home, they aren't getting health care, they aren't cashing a check, they aren't getting a job. A few years ago, Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer announced a plan to get 300 chronically homeless people off the streets and into housing. Out of the first 100 people in Orlando's Housing First program, 94 of them went through iDignity to get ID so they could get housing. That's good stuff. Paul was in the same boat. He had to get an ID, and that's exactly what iDignity did. Because of his medical condition, it's something called catatonic schizophrenia. I've never heard of that, but anyway. Paul was unable to come to our monthly events. There's no way, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do the crowd. He just wasn't up for him. So iDignity's attorney, Miss Jackie Dowd, give her a hand. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. I love that lady. And I worked together to help Paul get his birth certificate. We helped him get his Florida ID and his social security card. The big three, as I like to call it. You won't see Paul sitting by that electrical box anymore. He's off the streets, in stable housing in Orlando. He has his own room, a bed, a dresser, a bathroom. If he wants to make a meal, he can use the common kitchen. If he wants company, he can go to the day room. It's a simple life, but at night, Paul can lay his head down on his pillow, close his eyes, and know that he is safe and that someone cares. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul is not an invisible man perched next to an electrical box. Paul is our neighbor. Paul is our brother. Paul is a fellow citizen of the United States. He was one of those Jesus called the least of these. And what iDignity did for Paul is give him hope. People like Paul are what motivate iDignity staff and volunteers every day. The belief that love is the greatest gift of all, and that's why you're here today, out of love. Out of a belief that everyone deserves respect and opportunity. Tonight, you can give that to your neighbors, a chance for a better life and to be loved. I hope you can see from Paul's story that iDignity is a good investment. It opens doors and allows people like me to help others. When I meet a client on the street, I ask them 2 questions. What's your name? And do you have Florida ID?